I'm not able to give a full formal statement at this time. But very briefly, though, I do want to give my condolences to the Floyd family. There's going to be some other information in the future that would be of interest, and I hope things will give you some peace of mind. Thank you.
And I'll note that I did read your comments in the pre-sentence investigation as well.
Thanks, Ron.
All right, we are going to take a 15-minute recess so that I can complete the sentencing order based on what I've heard today.
This has been an incredibly difficult case for the Floyd family to have to endure. We are here after a jury verdict, finding him guilty of these offenses, and the court's consideration should not only be focused on the aggravating factors, but the mitigating factors as well. The Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission was established for a reason. And yes, the court in circumstances like these has discretion to go beyond and aggravate a sentence beyond the presumptive sentences established by the sentencing guidelines. But the sentencing guidelines don't differentiate between second-degree murders. Someone robs a liquor store, a police officer is involved in an incident, and a person dies in police custody. The law presumes, the legislature presumes, that the sentencing guidelines as established is a sufficient penalty for all of the second-degree murder categories or cases you would see. From 2019 back to 2010, a total of 90 people were sentenced.
Okay, he did a shit-ass job. He did a shit-ass job throughout the case already. And I just want to point out, like, you know, this is a good opportunity to unload your anxieties and your anger and your frustrations on this person, which is fine. I don't even think that he's a good person to begin with. But I will describe to you once again, the reason why he's doing this is because he wants to present his client in the most sympathetic way that he can, because that's his fucking job. I mean, he's still most likely a scumbag, but you know, he's just he's doing his job here
for second-degree murder. Those sentences, those people, there were more than that, but people who had a 0 criminal history score, more than 90 people were sentenced. 67%, or 60 of those 90 people, received a guideline sentence of 150 months. So 2/3 of all people in this same position received a guideline sentence. 20% received an aggravated sentence, 18 of the 90, and 13%, or 12 individuals.
Didn't you just have the opposite?
Were granted.
Didn't you just have the opposite opinion when we were watching the murder mystery shit? Well, I'm describing why he's saying this stuff, because it is my job to also tell you that, like, this isn't just purely out of him being a piece of shit, but a part of him being a piece of shit and, like, routinely trying to get off murderer cops and shit like that. He's a piece of shit separately, but also on top of that, the reason why he's describing the situation in this light is because it's his fucking job to do so. I'm not saying that to defend him. I don't think he should be defended, but this is literally the reason why he is trying to offer a sympathetic light, offer his client's side in a sympathetic light in a last-ditch attempt to fucking lower the sentencing from the judge as best as he can.
Mitigated departures. So if the legislature and the intent of the sentencing guidelines is to eliminate sentencing disparity, the law should presume that the guideline sentence is what is appropriate in this case. Judge may take into consideration at this point those aggravating factors, but you have to counterbalance them, which is the goal of the law, with the mitigating factors. I know that this has been an incredibly difficult case for the Floyd family to have to endure. the state of Minnesota. Likewise, prosecutors in this case have endured quite a bit, as has Mr. Chauvin's family. This is a case that has changed the world to some degree, and I hope it's positive. But it's my hope that the court follows the sentencing guidelines, applies the law in a reasoned manner, and imposes a just sentence.
Actually, Mr. Chauvin, would you join Mr. Nelson at the lectern? Mr. Chauvin, this is your opportunity if you wish to give any input to the court. And so I turn it over to you and your attorney.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, due to some additional legal matters at hand, I'm not able to give a full formal statement at this time. But very briefly, though, I do want to give my condolences to the Floyd family. There's going to be some other information in the future that would be of interest, and I hope things will give you some peace of mind. Thank you.
And I'll note that I did read your comments in the pre-sentence investigation as well.
Thanks, Ron.
All right, we are going to take a 15-minute recess so that I can complete the sentencing order based on what I've heard today. And let's reconvene at 2.
A few minutes ago as this crowd began to gather here. So what they wanted to listen to this in this square, actually it's right outside the courthouse, and they've been listening through a speaker here, and they've been reacting as we hear this sentencing unfold. And I just spoke with family over here. You guys came here from Chicago, right?
Yes, we did.
So what's your name, sir?
Willie Burton.
What's your reaction to what you've heard so far? They just took a break. I know you were not listening to the last few seconds, but former Officer Chauvin spoke very briefly. And I just wanted to get your thoughts. Why was it so important for you to be here, and what do you think will be an appropriate punishment?
I'm here today from the city of Chicago. I brought my daughter. My daughter is somebody of the autistic spectrum, and I want to make sure she feels, breathes, and knows what justice looks like and sees it from the ground level. Justice is a long process. We have to make sure our kids are partner with that process, but today is a very important step on people realistically seeing if the government and the city and the state is going to hold themselves accountable to make sure that we see what real justice looks like and not twisted justice.
So the prosecution has come back and they have said that they would want to see 30 years in prison for former Officer Chauvin. The defense has said that they would want probation and time served. They're arguing that, you know, he's already served his time and they want probation. What's your reaction to that? What do you think would be appropriate? Would you want to see on the higher end, or what are you thinking for the sentencing here?
What would be appropriate is whatever message is sent to police across the nation to make sure that they don't do this, that they understand what de-escalation looks like. If this can't send a signal to show that this doesn't need to happen again with police doing senseless killings, then the message wasn't served today in relation to the sentencing.
Thank you, sir, very much for talking to us. We really appreciate it. So, Lester, this is, you know, they're waiting here to see what the sentence will be handed down. Lester, as you know, we were here 2 months ago in this very spot, actually, right outside the courthouse, and it was a similar scene as a smaller crowd this time. But back then, people were listening to the verdict come down, and there were cheers that erupted. I can tell you, you know, when we heard speaking to the people here in the crowd, they would want to see on the higher end Chauvin be sentenced to at least 20, 25 years. Again, prosecutors asking for 30. He faces a maximum of 40 years in prison. As you've reported, Lester, prosecutors, you know, they say because of aggravating factors, he should get on the higher end of that of those sentencing guidelines. But again, there's high anticipation here. This is a community that has been waiting for this sentence to be handed down for quite a while. Again, they're taking a break now while we wait for court to resume. Lester?
All right, Gabe, thanks for very much. Mary Moriarty is a former chief public defender for Hennepin County. Mary, thank you for being with us. Let's talk about those aggravating factors. Clearly, the Assistant Attorney General made it very clear this is not, in his view, a typical second-degree murder case. How important are these factors in determining the sentence?
They're extremely important. And I think the judge gave us a heads up about that when he wrote a memo after he found 4 of the 5 aggravating factors that the Attorney General was looking for. So he wrote that he thought that Derek Chauvin abused his position of trust as a peace officer. And he also wrote quite a bit about the particular cruelty that Chauvin inflicted upon George Floyd, that this was a lengthy death, that George Floyd had been begging for his life, that it must have been terrifying. And so I think we're about to hear Judge Cahill directly address Chauvin and I believe talk about these aggravating factors.
We have, I don't want to presume what the judge will decide here, but typically in a murder case like this, will the judge have
I don't think he's going to get like just probation or anything like that, if that's what you guys are thinking. No, I think he's going to get fucking slapped in the face.
I don't know that there's a typical murder case like this, but
likely
yes,
a max
sure
sentence.
Judge Cahill already knows the number that he is going to give.
I know
he has
I'm
spent a
behind.
lot
We're
of time
waiting for
researching. Remember that both sides did file memos, pretty extensive memos on what they wanted the sentence to be. He's also had an opportunity to look at that defense memo pretty closely, which it was interesting to me because I would describe it as being as very defiant, which you could see throughout what we've already seen. Even from Chauvin's mother, who I don't think, I mean, it might have been good for Derek Chauvin to hear his mother there to support him, but she maintained that narrative.
He offered some deeper sense of remorse and empathy. That might have made a difference to the family.
All right, Paul Butler, thank you for standing by with us. NBC's Megan Fitzgerald is in George Floyd Square, where obviously this has been being watched very carefully. Megan?
Yeah, Lester, this is the place, obviously, where George Floyd was killed, just directly behind me here. And worth noting that just a couple of weeks ago, it was a group of community members, along with the city, that reopened this area, because you'll remember it was closed to traffic. But despite that, I can tell you that the same sentiment, the same passion, the same reasons why people have come here still remains. I want to kind of show you around what's happening here. Not a large group of people, but nonetheless, people who have come out here today to remember George Floyd's life. And this is what this area has always been, a place for people to pray, for them to reflect, also to remember the lives of other people killed at the hands of police. I've been speaking with people out here, and just moments ago, there were chants of 30 years. For many people, a high sentence is closure for them. Of course, we know that the other 3 officers will stand trial in March. But for them, this is a big day. This is a day that sort of wraps it all up. The officer that kneeled on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, the power of being in this location when they hear the verdict is something that they say can't be compared. So people are here with their cell phones out, waiting and hoping, they say, for a just verdict of 30 years, something they say will send a message to the nation.
Megan
Lester?
Fitzgerald in George Floyd Square for us as we all wait. Judge Cahill still in chambers right now. We expect to see him again shortly, and this sentencing will go forward. I want to bring in NBC legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, I want to get your thoughts, but especially on hearing from former Officer Chauvin's mother, what effect that may or may not have in your view.
It was definitely a very sympathetic moment for Derek Chauvin's mother, but it may not have played well with the judge, because sentencing judges don't want to hear someone get up and say how this sentencing will hurt me. I'm going to lose out because I'm losing a son. That's the kind of thing that judges might not take the right way, because it's really about either remorse or the harm that was done to the victim. So while I have all kinds of sympathy for Derek Chauvin's mom, and look, it's hard to get up there, and this is probably the hardest speaking moment of her life, for Derek Chauvin, the defense probably hopes that
kind of wild that, like, I mean, she's a mom, bro. Of course.
This is just about my loss of my son.
It's what is she supposed to say? Like, of course she's going to be like, my son is not racist. She's literally making an impact statement to garner sympathy for her son, thinking that, like, this will reduce his sentence. It's sad, but it's expected. You know what I mean? Like, that's just It was a bad statement, though. I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, she did raise someone who ended up murdering an innocent black person in cold blood in front of a massive crowd. So, you know, yeah. What were you expecting from the mother? Just like, what are you expecting for me to be like, yeah, fuck her? Like, okay.
And
yeah,
I'm not
fuck
able
her.
to give a full formal statement at this time. But very briefly, though, I do want to give my condolences to the Floyd family. There's going to be some other information in the future that would be of interest, and I hope things will give you some peace of mind. Thank you.
And again, Derek Chauvin in the courtroom just a few minutes ago before the judge retired to consider what he's heard this early.
Yeah, he's gonna in a few moments, in like a couple minutes, we are going to find out what the judge's opinion on the sentencing is. Like, the sentencing hearing is happening or happened already. There was a 15-minute break here, and when the judge comes back, he's going to tell us if he fucking threw the book at Derek Chauvin or not.
His trial. I found it interesting that he not only expressed his condolences to the Floyd family, but looked at them to express those condolences.
Like,
the cryptic nature of this new information that he says he believes
he didn't say he's sorry or regretful.
Family,
yes, he did.
Quote, peace of mind.
It doesn't matter.
I'm curious to know what that is. Because given the impact statements from the Floyd nephew and the two brothers, I don't see what could possibly come out that would bring them any kind of peace of mind. I believe it was Philonis Floyd who said, quote, "My family and I have been handed a life sentence," which I found interesting, especially after Derek Chauvin's mother, Carolyn Palenti, said in her statement, when you sentence my son, you will be sentencing me. These are very powerful moments in the courtroom. Where
yeah, you can go to jail too then. How about
victim
that?
Statements. But I wasn't expecting to hear from Derek Chauvin's mother. And so I am actually very curious to see how this plays out, especially given what Danny just said about how that might impact the judge. I don't
know why they're not talking about the weird statement that Chauvin said about, like, due to other legal issues, he can't give a statement, and that he gives his condolences to the Floyd family and says new information will come out that he hopes will give them a peace of mind. Like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what's going on there. So we'll see.
I mean, I understand what the prosecution was trying to do, trying to make this a very discreet case and have it be on the facts on the ground, following the evidence and keeping the trial focused, keeping the witnesses focused, keeping the judge focused and the jury focused and not distracted by all of the other things that were at play, the politics that got involved, and also how the murder of George Floyd fits into the larger narrative of this country when it comes to African Americans, African American men in particular, and their interactions, sometimes fatal interactions with law enforcement. They, as much as they were able to keep it separate there in the courtroom, out in the court of public opinion, they are intricately linked. The nation was watching nervously when the verdict came down because of viewing the Chauvin trial as part of the larger narrative. Today, even though those words were said again in the courtroom, the nation is going to be watching to see that one hurdle was reached, and a white police officer found guilty for murdering an unarmed black man. Now, how much time will that former police officer serve for killing that unarmed black man? And if there's one thing that Eric Nelson said that I agree with, no matter what sentence the judge hands down, there will be people on all sides of this issue who quite possibly might not be satisfied.
Most watching at home or in the workplace, but some are watching from across that courtroom. That's where we go to Gabe Gutierrez again, with a growing crowd waiting to hear what the judge hands down. Gabe.
Hi there, Lester. Well, yes, they're continuing to chant Black Lives Matter here, anxiously awaiting the sentence. I'm joined by Athena Papagiannopoulos here, Minneapolis resident. She has organized a few of the protests here in this community. And why was it so important for you to be physically right here, right now, listening to this sentence essentially in person? You're listening through a speaker out here.
Yeah, it's just important to show that we're still together with the community and that we're going to be here for the community and the family, like no matter what happens throughout the entire process.
And Athena, as my colleague, photojournalist Bill Angelucci kind of pans around and shows the crowd. Athena, what was your reaction to some of the things we just heard from? George Floyd's young daughter, Gianna, gave a message, and so did several of his family members. What was the most powerful section for you? What was the most powerful moment?
It's the fact that she has the strength to be up there doing what she's doing. She's a young black woman, just really a child, and the whole situation is just so beyond heartbreaking. But to have to put someone up there time and time again and constantly be in the spotlight, her presence in general is amazing.
There were some in the crowd here that gave a strong reaction when they heard Derek Chauvin's mother, as well as Chauvin himself, very briefly get up and speak. What was your reaction when you heard that?
I understand when you have a child, you want to back them no matter what, you know, and their wrongs and their rights and what they do, but I just don't have respect for that because he's clearly just going through the motions of this trial. So for her to have more emotion than him throughout this entire process in that small snippet, I didn't feel good about it.
And Athena, we were here in this spot just 2 months ago when the verdict came down. There were cheers that erupted here. It seemed like a weight had been lifted off of this community in Minneapolis. What do you consider to be the historic significance of this moment, and what do you consider an appropriate punishment for Derek Chauvin to be?
We can't get the appropriate punishment because, you know, with the laws and everything, but it has to be maximum of what they're willing to give, or else that's just as bad as them saying, no, you don't get it. Because if we get, 10, 12, 13 years, that's them saying that you're not worthy of what I feel my child is worthy of. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. And just being here with the community just makes it all better because...
Damn, what is she... He's like, he's not going to get what he deserves. Holy shit. I wonder what she meant by that. Anyway, look, I'm going to run the ad right now. No fucking clever segue because I don't want people to miss out on it when the verdict or when the sentencing comes in. So it's, another top of the hour ad right now. If you'd like an ad-free broadcasting experience, you already know. VPN, ad block, subscription. You can subscribe for $5 or you can subscribe for free with a Twitch Prime, but here is the ad break now, boys.
Again, not just for this community, Lester, but obviously across the country. We keep talking to people from Chicago, from Michigan, and also this woman here. Are you from Minneapolis,
yes,
ma'am?
My name is Marcia.
Marcia,
born and raised here.
Sure, born and raised. Why is it so important for you to be here right now?
Gabe, we're going to break away from you. The judge is back in the courtroom.
Okay, well, I was wrong. Sorry.
Not just the people who were in the courtroom here, but also those who provided written statements, both from the Floyd family and the defendant's family. I've read all the impact statements that were submitted earlier and listened carefully to all the input here today. And it is truly appreciated that you took the time to stay with this case and to provide me with input. I have reviewed the pre-sentence investigation and carefully considered all the facts of the case and the law, but my comments are actually going to be very brief, because most of it's going to be in writing. I have a 22-page memorandum that is going to be attached to the sentencing order. And why am I doing it in writing? To emphasize the fact that determining the appropriate sentence in any case, and in this case, is a legal analysis. It's applying the rule of law to the facts of an individual and specific case. And that is why, as opposed to trying to being profound here on the record, I prefer that you read the legal analysis that explains how I determined the sentence in this case.
Uh-oh.
What the case is, or what the sentence is not based on, is emotion, or sympathy. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge the deep and tremendous pain that all the families are feeling, especially the Floyd family. You have our sympathies. And I acknowledge and hear the pain that you are feeling. I acknowledge the pain not only of those in this courtroom, but the Floyd family who are outside this courtroom and other members of the community.
I have to
It
pee
has been
so bad,
painful
dude.
throughout Hennepin County, throughout the state of Minnesota, and even the country. But most importantly, we need to recognize the pain of the Floyd family. I'm not going to attempt to be profound or clever because it's not the appropriate time. I'm not basing my sentence also on public opinion. I'm not basing it on any attempt to send any messages. A trial court judge, the job of a trial court judge is to apply the law to specific facts and to deal with individual cases. And so, Mr. Chauvin, as to count one, based on the verdict of the jury finding you guilty of unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony under Minnesota Statute 609.19 subdivision 2 paren 1, it is the judgment of the court that you now stand convicted of that offense. Pursuant to Minnesota Statute section 609.04, counts 2 and 3 will remain unadjudicated as they are lesser offenses of count 1. As sentenced for count 1, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd. You are granted credit for 199 days already served. Pay the mandatory surcharge of $78 to be paid from prison wages. You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition, or explosives for the remainder of your life. Provide a DNA sample as required by law. Register as a predatory offender as required by law. And then you will receive a copy of the order and also the attached memorandum explaining the court's analysis. Anything further from the state?
If this needs to be said, we just ask that it be executed forthwith.
Defendant is remanded to the custody of the sheriff to be transported back to the DOC or whichever custody is currently holding him. Anything for the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. We are adjourned.
The judge not reading his full sentencing memorandum and getting virtually right to the sentencing and sentencing Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer, to 22 and a half years in prison. That is less than the maximum, but certainly far more than Chauvin and his attorneys were asking for. Let's go to Gabe Gutierrez right now, who is across the street from the courthouse, where we've been watching a growing crowd. Assume the word is getting there now. What's the reaction you're seeing?
Hey, Lester. Well, I should let you know this crowd is maybe on a 30-second delay from where they've been hearing, so it is just starting to spread through the crowd right now. It was quiet.
22,
people kind of taking
it's
it all
22.5,
in,
22 and a half years.
Process, and I'm trying to listen for some reaction now.
It's a solid sentence, in my opinion.
Spoke with a short time ago, Athena, you were just listening to it. So 22 and a half years, the sentence handed down to Derek Chauvin. That is 10 years more than the recommended guidelines. You just heard what the judge had to say. What's your immediate reaction?
It's wild to...
I'm taking this as a win for my community right now. We needed this. It could have gone just so far left that there was no coming back. He said, that he's not doing this, for the public, but he knew he really, really had to. It just had to be done this way, and I'm really thankful, so thankful for my community in the world and just showing that we can't go on like this. But I also take a second back to think about all of the other people this has has happened to with the knee on the neck since George Floyd. So I'm taking it as this is a small victory right now, and I'm just so appreciative. But it's going to take me a second to process it.
He didn't get nowhere
and be
near
like,
enough. Seeing the
okay,
bare minimum
you have
isn't a
22 years
win.
for him. Now let's move forward with who has continued to do this after.
Thank you very much, Athena. I really appreciate you talking to Lester. And I was just starting to speak with a Minneapolis resident right before the hearing came back. And ma'am, hi, how are you? Yeah, they gave 22 and a half years, ma'am, is what they just gave him. So the word is trickling out here, Lester. Ma'am, what's your immediate reaction? Derek Chauvin sentenced to 22 and a half years in prison.
Maybe he set an example out of other dirty cops here. It's good that it's bad what he did, but he's not shot other black men here. They say he has no criminal charges, which is true, but the police they didn't charge him for it.
Right. Well, thank you, ma'am, very much for talking to us. I know it's kind of hard to get some information here, but 22 and a half years. Thank you very much, ma'am. So, Lester, again, kind of a situation here where we're trying to get as much reaction as we can. And again, word is starting to trickle out. The judge said the sentence first in months, so people are trying to make the calculation here again to 22 and a half years. But, sir, the situation here, the sentence just handed down 22 and a half years. We just spoke.
I have to pee. I'll be back in 1 second.
From Chicago.
Okay?
What's your reaction?
Guilty was served. I don't think that that's enough time to send a message that needs to be sent to say that justice is trying to work for people of color. It's a dent, but we still feel empty today. We feel empty because it still feels like twisted justice in which we're all so accustomed to, but we did get a guilty, and then we did get time, but we just feel void today. It still feels void.
Thank you very much, sir. So, Lester, again, some conflicting feelings here. Some folks, you may be able to hear somebody behind me. There's a bit of anger here that they wanted more. Certainly, many people in this community, they had wanted the maximum, up to 40 years. Legal experts, of course, said that wasn't likely. Prosecutors asked for 30 years. So, again, 22 and a half years for Derek Chauvin on that second-degree murder charge. A mixed reaction so far. Some people saying it was enough, so they wanted more than 20 at least. Others, as you can hear in the distance, perhaps there is some anger. They wanted more, Lester. So we're continuing to to get reaction here as this crowd continues to grow. But for now, I'm going to send that back to you, Lester.
All right, Gabe, thanks very much. 22 and a half years. That would put Mr. Chauvin at 67 when he is released from prison. Let's go to Paul Butler right now. Paul, is this in the neighborhood of where you thought the judge might come down in this case?
It's actually higher, Lester. The judge essentially threw the book at Mr. Chauvin. 22 years, that's a new precedent in Minnesota. The only other officer to be convicted of murder in that state got 12 and a half years. So the judge said his sentence was about legal analysis.
Mohammed Noor got 12 and a half years for murdering, I'm forgetting her name now, the victim's name.
This case will impact other officers. This is tough sentence. Mr. Chauvin will not see the light of day.
I don't think people understand the significance of
hopefully that will
putting a cop in jail for a murder during putting a cop in jail and serving justice. And the reason why people are so fucking upset all the time and in the streets is because of precisely how difficult it is to throw a cop in jail for murdering someone on the job. Okay? Half the time you can't even throw cops in jail for murdering people off the fucking job, let alone on the job. And in Minnesota, that was not a thing that ever happened. Never happened for a white cop murdering a black person on the job. And the only time it happened was with Mohammed Noor. And it was for 12 and a half years. So anyway.
For justice for him, and we're going to keep supporting all these other families, including Ford. Love y'all. Big up.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, man. I'm trying to let y'all motherfuckers know if y'all ain't leaving your fuck off. Fuck your story and fuck everything you cover.
Okay. What the fuck's going on here? I hope that the fairness exhibited here is extended to everyone. I turned off the audio for a second. They're having a hard time filming right now.
Independent media, straight the fuck up. I'm black every fucking second. This man is speaking every second. This is not a fucking story. We're not zoo exhibits. We're not fucking animals. I fought American justice more than anyone else in history.
Do you think it's a good sentencing? Yes, I think it's a good sentence. I do. But, you know, people will disagree with me on that. But with everything I believe as far as like rehabilitative justice and with everything I believe, yes, I think 22 and a half years is a decent sentence. Anyway, Van Jones disagrees. He was disappointed. Okay. He's only getting 15 years. You're saying because he's going to be out on good behavior? Yeah, I know. I understand that. But ultimately, that's not something that you're considering when you're giving people their sentencing.
From this, I dedicated my life to this fight for justice, and none of these fucking corporate media. All y'all care about is black trauma. They was labeled black trauma and putting it on display.
Like for the people who are
the most thorough research documented of American injustice.
He's also a cop in prison, so just remember that.
I can prove to the chief, international chief of police. And now we got the fucking police. Is anyone from the media going to cover this?
Hey, can we get everybody back in the circle, please? Hey, everybody back in the circle, please.
Right on.
Let's not be all over. Can we get everybody back in the circle? Hey, can we get everybody back in the circle, please?
Why are there non-violent offenders serving? Why are there non-violent drug offenders serving longer sentences is a great question. Because of America's incredibly draconian attitude towards crime and punishment. That's why. But the proper approach with a focus on rehabilitative justice is not to say like throw the book at like every single person. The proper approach focusing on rehabilitative justice is to say that this is a decent sentencing. And that that sympathy, timed tenfold, should be extended to all nonviolent offenders that are in prison for ridiculous charges. There's an old black man that just recently got out of prison after serving like 60 years or some shit in jail or in prison for stealing 2 T-shirts. Like this is basically what I talk about with respect to the American criminal justice system. It's ridiculous. It's horrifying.
Awakened to this issue in a new way. George Floyd likely, let's hope, did not die in vain.
Terry, thank you. And we're seeing more people there in Minneapolis showing up at that memorial site. Deb,
Why are you comparing it to nonviolent criminals? I'm not the one comparing it to nonviolent criminals. Chatter just brought it up.
For healing the country that has been through so much over the course of the last year. Ben Crump himself says one step closer to healing. And I see you've been talking to a lot of people about this.
Well, you know, I think for so many people, it's hard not to feel the personal effects of this, even as Terry just talked about.
Sorry, it wasn't 67 years. It was a 20-year prison sentence for stealing 2 shirts.
The mom of a black son.
The man's name was Guy Frank.
I mean, but we all witnessed this, and we went through this case and this trial. So it's been a traumatic time, I think, for a lot of people. We know that there's still more charges charges to come.
I said
officers to face
67,
charges in this case.
but that was his
But
age.
this
I
kind
fucked
of
up the
closes
number.
the chapter on this part of the George Floyd story, and I do believe that for some people there will be some measure of satisfaction. Doesn't happen very often, particularly when it is a black a person who was lost at the hands of police. But I think for a number of people, and certainly I would say for this mom, it is nice to see that this case is sort of put to rest, at least for now. And I think that for a lot of people, this will be maybe some measure of healing.
Like you said, closing one chapter. There still is more to this story.
Absolutely.
Deborah, thank you so much. And thanks to our entire team for the coverage of Derek Chauvin's sentencing, 22.5 years in prison. Our coverage on this story continues on ABC News Live and abcnews.com. Of course, we'll have a full wrap-up on this and that breaking news out of Florida, that 12-story building collapse. Our David Muir is there covering the tragic events. He will be there live tonight for World News Tonight. For the entire team, I'm Wick Johnson in New York. Have a good day.
He will have to be in solitary for most of his sentence. His situation is not going to be good in prison. He's a fucking murderer cop. Cops in general don't have a good time in prison, okay? Like, they are at the same level as like pedophiles in prison. They will get murdered in general population. Okay? I don't even know if they can get I don't even know if they can be around other pedophiles that would still probably murder them. Which is so he's not going to have a fun time in prison. It's not like a cakewalk, if that is any solace or comfort for those who are looking for vindication and revenge from the criminal justice system. Okay? So to all of the draconian Andes, I understand why you would be very angry in seeing blood in this circumstance, and knowing what you do, knowing what you know about our, knowing what you know about this particular instance of cold-blooded murder. Do you think it's okay that cops can get extrajudicially murdered in prison? No. The other part of that is that will literally be used as a way to maybe even, we'll see what happens. But that circumstance could be used to lower his sentence down the line. People who are saying he might get out on good behavior in 15 years. That's true. He could. Fuck rehabilitation. He's a racist murderer. Okay. Once again, I understand where you're coming from in this because of how passionate everyone feels about the situation. But remember what we talk about all the time with respect to rehabilitative justice. Our justice system doesn't create justice. It creates resentment, pain, and suffering. Anyone looking for justice in sentencing hearing is looking in the wrong place. Yes. This guy will get to start a new life in 15 years. George Floyd doesn't. Yeah, I know. I understand. I have this conversation about nearly every single offense. Unfortunately, when talking to Americans, there are a couple issues that the American leftist audience routinely loses their principles on. The criminal justice system being rehabilitative rather than focusing on the extended length of sentencing and more punitive is one of those instances. And the other one is sex and sex work and sexuality in general. Americans are very puritanical and lose their shit when it comes to sex and have like really backwards points of view on sex and sexuality. And they have really backwards views on the criminal justice system as they routinely advocate for harsher sentencing. Overall, from my point of view, knowing what I know and also my principles that I believe in, I believe that the 22.5-year sentence is decent. Remember, this is not justice. This is the justice system taking the first step for the first time, possibly. Wait, hold on one second. For the first time, possibly ever, bringing this sort of conviction. You know what I mean? So it's a first step towards justice. Justice would be making him learn CRT. Okay, shut the fuck up. It's nuts how reactionary the left get when it comes to revenge. Personally, I would not want the death sentence. I may happen to be murdered. It is insane not to give another a chance to rehabilitate. Yes. Being draconian back isn't the solution, is what you're saying, right? Yes, that's what I'm saying. That is what I'm saying. And ultimately, what I'm also saying here is that, like, the 22-year sentence is not only a decent sentence for this murderer, but also is a good way to show the rest of the country and the cops that, like, hey, there is a fraction of accountability coming your way if you do act this way. So it is still incredibly significant. Okay. I mean, if you act this way and get caught on video, yeah. I wonder if him being caught will lead to the friction with prison guards and the such. Maybe good behavior isn't a given. Isn't that the same logic as mandatory minimums? I mean, it would be the same logic as mandatory minimums if we literally had, like, any sort of fucking accountability within the criminal justice system for cops behaving this way, but we don't. So, like, this is one of the few instances where there's, like, at least a specific way of showing, like, here, there are some punishments that will get doled out if you act out. At a certain point, if you have a child and you're trying to educate your child on what not to do, at a certain point, you have to draw a line. Like, as someone who believes in reforming the criminal justice system, I don't say that there is no need for prisons at all, or that there's no need for even the police force in general. There always are going to be laws, and law and order should be law and order should always be well defined and maintained. So, you know, this is a step towards that. Anarchists in shambles. I mean, anarchists, even prison abolitionists understand that there are, like, edge cases where taking someone away from the rest of society is a necessity. It's just more so about democratizing that decision as best as possible, and all of the other decisions leading up to that. Anarchy is about the abolition of unjust hierarchies, not hierarchies for the sake of existence. Like hierarchy, it's not about abolishing hierarchy for the sake of there being a hierarchy. Well, maybe some anarchists do believe that, but anyway. Okay? This is the judge's conclusion for on the 22-page explanation. Part of the mission of the Minneapolis Police Department is to give citizens voice and respect. Here, Mr. Chauvin, rather than pursuing the MPD mission, treated Mr. Floyd without respect and denied him the dignity owed to all human beings, which he certainly would have extended to a friend or a neighbor. In the court's view, 270 months, which amounts to an additional 10 years over the presumptive 150-month sentence, is the appropriate sentence. Yeah. Anarchy is about abolishing all hierarchies. Unjust hierarchies can be considered to be the goal of every ideology because unjustified is entirely subjective. Okay, my bad, positive person. Once again, our favorite Anarchitty in the chat chimes in. Yes, dude. Good luck abolishing all hierarchies. Got it. Like, even when I try to redeem anarchism, you, like, literally turn around and have to be like, no, actually, it is ridiculous. Like, no, the worldview is ridiculous. I know all the other Anarchitties also going to fucking now chime in and be like, no, you're literally wrong. So justifiable hierarchies need to also be abolished. So just we will live in a world without any hierarchy whatsoever. Got it. Yes, always. Yes, I do mention this a lot, but yes, anarchists might have some strange views, but they're very present and helpful with activism/protest and mutual aid. Yes, they are. They're at the forefront of social justice as well, regardless of what their worldview might be. Yes, abolish parents, abolish mods, abolish all forms of regulation, abolish all forms of laws which are built upon hierarchy, the notion of hierarchy. Like, anarchy is when I want to break the law, but then someone tells me I shouldn't do that and violates my freedom and my personal liberty to be able to break the law. Good one. Okay. Let's continue. The law only exists to serve the needs of the bourgeoisie. Yeah, like, yeah, Yeah, correct. Like, statutory rape. Just serving the needs of the bourgeoisie. Very good. No good. There are no good laws in the books. Is a really solid approach to this. You can say that the bourgeoisie routinely break it, okay? You can say that the capital-owning class routinely skirt the law in a similar capacity to how, like, Western nations have built this idea of human rights exclusively to just bully other developing nations and justify their violations of human rights in an effort to stop the violations of human rights that are occurring in smaller nations. You say something like that, but ultimately, like, throwing human rights out in the trash across the board is a silly approach, I think. And if you have laws, you're always going to need a regulatory force, whether it's completely democratized or not. There is going to be a regulatory force that, that is organized and maintains the law. Okay. What's next? A license to toast in your own damn toaster? Yes. I think all laws and regulations are bad, which is why I think wearing a seatbelt is silly. That's the nanny state stopping me from wanting to, wanting to get just be significantly more damaged and injured in a car accident than otherwise. Real men fly out the car window, brother. Come on, the liberals in your chat will think all anarchists are like that? No, but the fucking most vocal ones are annoying sometimes and do take like a relatively cringe POV on how the world works. And, sometimes I like making fun of that for a brief moment.